Thank you for coming in tonight, Mr. and Mrs. Dr. and Mrs. Zeus. What we're going to do tonight is just go through the strategies. We talked about what your issues were last time that we saw you, and so I thought I'd put it on the whiteboard because to make it easier for both of you to understand where we are at the moment and where we want to go to try and get you to a goal of 100,000 income when you retire, whether it's retirement early at say 60 or whether you have to retire at 58 even, what would it look like there? And if you had to retire at 63 or go right through to the 65 retirement age that you would ideally like when the children are both finished school. So I've put on the whiteboard here what we talked about last time, as were your main goals and where you wanted to go. So we talked about number one, your home at the moment, you have 1.3 million on your home and you've got a loan for 417,000, but you've got an offset account of 421,000. Your children are both quite young still. Your son is 10 years old and your daughter is 8 years old, and we worked out what their education costs will be until they actually complete school at 17. So it's around about 219,000 over that 10-year period. Of course, it ramps up when your daughter goes to high school from the 3,000 that she currently has a year until up to 10,000 a year. We talked about your two cars. Currently, your cars are worth $60,000 between the two of them, but you're saying that in approximately 2 years' time, you will need to upgrade those cars. With the trade-in of those cars, it'll be approximately $56,000 to upgrade those two cars and get yourselves newer models. You also said that one of your goals with the children is to go to the USA in the next 12 months and have a holiday which would cost you around about $40,000. With that also, you feel that your home isn't adequate if you do actually, Dr. Zeus, suffer the illness that you've been diagnosed with. And so you're saying that possibly 150,000 you'll need to do in the next 12 months to make the home adequate for you, not just now, but also in your retirement if the illness takes hold. You've got an investment home as well that used to be a principal place of residence. You really love the house. You just converted it to an investment property. You don't have a loan on it at the moment, and you're receiving an income of $30,951, which is approximately 2.3% return you're receiving on that a year at the moment. So it's not a huge return, but you've said though you currently didn't anticipate selling it, you have no real ties to that house. You're not intending to move back in it when you retire. You've only had it a couple of years as an investment property. So the ideal part for that would be that at the moment you don't have a large capital gain on that. So I'll come back to that a little bit later. So I'll put a little asterisk back on that and we'll come back and talk about that a little bit later. You do have shares, Mrs. Zeus, as well. You were saying that you have shares, and I've gone through and worked out the value of those shares, and it's about $57,799. You're getting an income of about $660 from that. Again, it's not a huge income. It's only about 3% before tax. So that part is not a massive saving that you're going to get. For those two, you said, look, you have no qualms about selling them, buying them, whatever. If you need to, you will. These ones with the little dots on there, there's your goals that you need to do something with in the next 2 years. So they're sort of your short-term goals, monetary-wise, of money that you have to find to actually pay out in the next 2 years. So at the moment, is that what you agreed with me to actually, that were your main goals at this stage?
Yes, thank you. You've summed it up quite well.
Thank you, Dr. Zeus. Now, from that, we then go on to what your needs are if the illness takes hold, and then looking at, well, how can you fund that retirement if you did have to actually leave work early. So you both have some insurance at the moment. Dr. Zeus, we'll start with you at the moment. You have $450,000 in life and term deposits and total and permanent disablement. We talked about this last time, that it is in your super fund, so it is fairly cost effective. With those ones, a total and permanent disablement, as you would know being a medical doctor, but I will explain it to Mrs. Zeus to let her into what the requirements would be if you actually became totally and permanently disabled. It would mean that you aren't able to work in your position or another position that you'll actually have the education and training for. So more than not, it's usually after 2 years of being out of the workforce, you would be deemed that you can't go back, but it's a little bit more difficult than that. You'd have to have 2 medical specialists actually say that you were totally and unable to work ever again. So it is, the illness might stop you from working as a doctor, but they might deem that you can still work, say, in an office or something like that. So it's not on your occupation, it's on any occupation that you could do for your education and training. So it is a good thing to have. Say if you were driving down the road to work and you had a massive car accident and you were paralysed, then that insurance would then come into play for something of a severe accident or a severe illness.
So just to clarify, I mean, if I'm accustomed to a certain level of income as a doctor, and I have an incident or something, mm-hmm. And I can then get a job as a medical rep or something, but and I can use my skills that I have,
yes.
Right? But a medical rep doesn't get anywhere near the same income as a doctor.
Exactly.
Where do I stand?
Exactly right, Dr. Zeus. And you are totally correct with regards to that, because it's not your own occupation on this, it's any occupation, because it's sitting in the insurance. The insurance is sitting in superannuation, so you're definitely correct. But then before that, you would actually have income protection coming through. So your income protection at the moment is $8,000 per month, but with that you have a 90-day wait, and you have a 2-year benefit period. So that means after that 2-year period, you won't get paid anymore for that illness or injury. If you took, say, 6 months of your illness, and say you broke your leg in 3 places and you couldn't work as a doctor for 6 months till it healed, and then you would get paid after 90 days, you would get paid the remaining 3 months. And then in 2 years later, say your illness that you've been diagnosed with stopped you from working, you would get paid 2 years on that because it's a different illness. And then with regards to that, you would only get paid for the 2-year period, and then they would stop your money. So you're totally correct. You would not be receiving the income you're receiving at the moment. So what we have to make sure is we try and set you up at the moment to fund these initial requirements in the short term, but also make sure that you're receiving enough income after that 2 years that you can still fund your children's education and your ongoing expenses on an annual basis. And if you have to give up work early, that you have enough money to actually fund your retirement. Does that answer your question, Mr. Zeus?
I think so, yes.
Fantastic. Mrs. Zeus, you have life cover of $196,000 and the same total and permanent disablement. You don't have any income protection, but as you said, your income is minimal at the moment because you are the primary carer for your children at the moment. So you didn't feel that it was necessary. With regards to this, Mrs. Zeus, you said that you didn't want to go into getting any more insurances. And Dr. Zeus, because of your medical condition, we can't actually go through and get any more insurances. So we just have to work with what we've got there and make it work as best we can. The next part we discussed was actually if something did happen to either one of you, making sure that your estate is covered and covering your family. At the moment, you do both have a will, but it's not current. So that is a major concern because your will at the moment was taken out just after you were both married and you didn't have children and you didn't make provision in your will for your children. So that is quite a large concern, so that needs to be addressed very quickly. You don't have an enduring power of attorney, either of you, and that would mean that if you weren't able to function, to sign things, you weren't coherent or something like that, or had a stroke or something, then you don't have anyone to act on your behalf financially. Your insurances and your superannuation both do not have any death nominations on them, so we need to address that as a matter of urgency as well.
What does that mean?
A binding death nomination means that it's your wish of how your money is passed on in your estate. So if you were to pass away at the moment, because you don't have a binding death nomination on your superannuation or your insurances, because it's in superannuation, you're leaving up to the trustees of the super fund to decide where your money goes.
If my will's up to date, wouldn't that counteract that?
No, it doesn't, unfortunately, because the trustees actually, it's a separate component for the super and insurances, and the trustees actually manage the distribution of that. Your will does not. If you had it in your super and insurance that it has passed to your estate, then of course your estate would then decide. But at the moment, you don't have anything sitting on there. So what the trustees could say is, say, for example, Mr. Zeus, Dr. Zeus, if you passed away, they might say, well, you have 2 children that are very young as well as your wife. So what we're going to say is, well, we're not going to pass all the money from your superannuation and your insurance payout to your wife. We're going to split it up a third, a third, and a third. So a third to each child, a third to your wife.
Well, that's not acceptable.
No, it's not. And that's why we need to address that as a matter of urgency with a binding death nomination, so that your wishes are not just taken into account, but they are governing how the trustees pass that money back to your estate. And then the next one is a testamentary trust. This is something that when you're making up your will, you should really discuss this with your solicitor, but it's a way of, when you've got small children, guiding the money to be paid out to those children in the most cost-effective, tax-effective manner. So definitely when you're talking about your will, I've just added it there. Of course, I'm not a legal practitioner, but when you go and see about your will, definitely talk to the solicitor about what are the best options, and is it best to have a testamentary trust for both your children, so that if both of you were to pass away, your money would be, your estate would be passed through to your children tax effectively, but also look after them until they're adults, so that then they'll still continue going to the same school and things like that.
So does that mean we have to appoint some sort of guardian who would bring them up?
Absolutely, you should have that, and that's one thing, that because you don't have a current will, you don't have guardianship in there either. So definitely the solicitor would address that with you and actually have guardians put in place for your children if the worst happened and both of you were to pass away.
Okay.
Absolutely. So that is a really major issue as well, that I see that we need to address that today, part of it today. And the part that we can address today is this part of your nominations. The other parts, of course, you'll have to make an appointment with the solicitor, but I would say that should be done as a matter of urgency as well. The next part is your superannuation. And looking at your superannuation, Dr. Zeus, you've actually been paying money into your superannuation, and so you have a reasonable balance sitting in your superannuation. Mrs. Zeus, you don't have, your superannuation, because you've been the primary carer, is quite low at the moment. So we need to address that with regards to your superannuation, and we'll come back to that as well. So Dr. Zeus, you've got insurance here in that one, so we can't really touch that because we don't want to stop the insurance, and the same with this one here, Mrs. Zeus. Now, with regards to your incomes, we also went through your income and your expenses. So, Dr. Zeus, you're currently earning $215,000 with the bonus of $94,000. That's been paid to you for the last couple of years. So it's been paid to you on an annual basis every year for the last 10 years. So we're confident that that will continue. Your interest in the investment property, $30,951. Mrs. Zeus, you're $22,000 a year with $660 approximately from your share portfolio. Your expenses at the moment are $84,000 a year, but we sat down and we worked out what you expect them to be for the next few years. So it's no point just putting that down now, because your expenses will go up because of the children's education. Your daughter, when she goes to high school, that will actually ramp up quite a lot for you. So we worked out that it'll be on average $12,000 a year for the next 3 years, but then because then your son will be finishing school, it will sort of slow down and remain at the $120,000 a year. You do expect, though, when your children leave home and have finished their schooling, that your expenses will go down to approximately $36,000 a year. So, you said, Dr. Zeus, that once your children finish their school, your bit's over, and so then they can be independent. Whether that's the case or not, whether that $120,000 continues on for a few years after that, that'll be your call at that point in time. But you did say, though you expect your expenses to be $36,000 in retirement, you're wanting $100,000 in retirement income to give you money to go travelling and do the things that you're wanting to do in retirement. So this is what we talked about last time, and this is what the extra research is given on what we discussed last time. Is that fairly accurate of what we talked about last time?
Look, you've taken the first 14 minutes or 15 minutes, Therese, to sum up effectively what the situation is. I've got a meeting in about 10 to 15 minutes. Are you able to give me what I need to know in the next 15 minutes?
Absolutely, Dr. Zeus. Thank you for letting me know that your time is short today. Look, we can go over this again if you need to go over that, but most definitely we'll.
Well, understanding what your advice is important. I appreciate the fact that you've done it on a whiteboard here, because that allows me to, to visualize what you're talking about.
That's great.
And it's easier to understand.
Okay.
But if we could sum it up fairly quickly, I've got a meeting probably in about 15 minutes that I need to be at.
Okay, that's great. No problems at all. Well, again, I've summed up the strategy that we're wanting to go through on the whiteboard, and I will give you a copy of this as well, Dr. and Mrs. Zeus, so that you can understand where we're going to as well and take it home. And of course, we'll go through the statement of advice. I'll make another meeting to go through the statement of advice with you, Dr. Zeus, understanding that time is short today. So let's go through what the strategy is from this point on. So we're looking at your total net income after taxes of $228,951. For the first year, it's $84,000 your expenses are. So then we looked at, so the top line is the things that you want to do in the next, and the bottom line is the things that I really need to do. And so in the timeline, year 1, year 2, 3, 4, and 5. I've only gone up to 5 years because I think past that 5 years, we'll review it every year how we're going. But I really feel that going past the 5 years at the moment, it's too far. So because things might change along the way.
Things will change, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, great, fantastic. So the first thing is you've got a USA trip and you've got your home repairs, $190,000. Okay, you've got money sitting in your offset account at the moment, and it's quite a lot of money you have in your offset account. So those two things might not come along straight away, but what I'm going to go through is the strategy for the next year and why we're doing that. So I would like to pay down your home loan, $308,816 out of that offset account. That will leave you with the home loan of $108,814. The current interest rate that you're on is 3.92%. But because you still have this money sitting in your offset account until you really need it, then it will actually counteract the interest you're paying on that. Now, number 2 is in species the share into super for you, Mrs. Zeus. What in species share into super means that we're going to transfer those shares from sitting outside of super inside of super, and we can do that into a modern super fund, a retail super fund. So we're going to do that for you. So that means we're starting to build on your super balance for the future. The next part I wanted to do was actually sell the investment property.
Why would you want to sell the investment property?
I'm so glad you asked that, Dr. Zeus. Selling the investment property because it's only delivering you a 3% return at the moment, which isn't a huge return. I know it is a guaranteed return, and you said, well, that can fund the education for the children, things like that. But we have to think about if you were to, this illness was to progress with you and you had to leave work sooner rather than later, putting that money into superannuation would give you a tax-free retirement income. And it would work harder for you in the super fund than it would in your home. It means too, it's very hard to sell a room in retirement when you need to get some money out. If it's in your superannuation fund, you can actually sell off part of your superannuation fund if you need extra money. Would you agree with that?
Well, I can see it's almost like you're a little bit more liquid.
You are, and that's a very...
But do I need to be liquid now, or can I wait to be liquid?
You could wait to be liquid, but the difference is now at the moment, Dr. Zeus, we're trying to build your super fund, and there's a reason why we would do that now. The reason is coming into the next 2 components. So can I just quarantine that question and we'll come back to it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Dr. Zeus, I'd like you to contribute as a concessional contribution $5,000 a year. And the reason why, well, it's actually not $5,000. It's currently $4,575. And the reason for that, Dr. Zeus, is because your super guarantee money that you get from your employer is $20,525, So we can't pay any more than $25,000 in anymore. So the rules changed this year. So I'd like to take you up so that you're maximising that. It'll reduce your tax slightly, but with your taxable income, we can't reduce it much.
The rules seem to change on super so often.
They do change quite a lot. The reason is the government's trying to balance it up for everybody to get the best advantage, to get more money into super for more people.
Yeah, haven't they sorted this sort of stuff out?
Look, well, I'm not in government and I'm not in power, but I think they're trying to sort it out, and that's why there's so many rule changes, and that's why my job is to stay on top of it all for you.
Okay.
To help you and guide you through it. Now, I'd also like you to take $100,000 out of that $421,000 that you have in the offset account, and that's why we're not paying all of it in here, and actually put $100,000 in to your super as a non-concessional contribution. And also the same thing for you, Mrs. Zeus, $100,000 as a non-concessional contribution. The reason is because we're locked into an amount we can pay in a year now. We can only pay in up to $300,000 over a 3-year period. So it's $100,000 a year and $300,000 over 3 years on the bring forward rule that they call it. The reason is because you haven't sold your investment property yet, it may take 6 months to sell that property. So the idea was, let's put the $100,000 in this year at the moment, and that's why I've left you with a little balance here. And then after that, let's put in the remainder of the money. So your total non-concessional contribution, Mrs. Zeus, would be the shares plus also about $38,000 extra, top you up to $100,000. We're also putting in, you're not contributing any money to super at the moment, Mrs. Zeus. So putting in $4,460 this year would mean that you've gone up to your maximum, but we're not going to put in extra money because you have a tax-free threshold of $18,200. So there's no point in paying 15 cents in the dollar to go into super when you're actually not paying 15 cents in the dollar tax. So that's why I've made it that figure there. And the other part is estate planning. So when you said why sell the investment property and they're changing rules to the super, the reason would be that we're going to then come into year 2. And year 2, you're wanting to buy your cars for $56,000 and your expenses will go up to $96,000 this year. With regards to this, because we've sold the investment property now, we're going to pay off the remainder of that home loan, and then we're going to continue to contribute money to super. And this would mean that you're putting in $100,000 this year, and this year, year 2, you're going to put in $300,000 on the bring forward rule to try and get as much as we can into super, so it's tax free. So we're going to be contributing $300,000 each as a non-concessional contribution. The other reason that this is really important is, as a non-concessional contribution, if you were to both pass away, it's passed to your children tax-free if they're past being dependent children. Once they're independent children, it's passed to them tax-free. So that's another huge advantage for your estate. We need to pay some capital gains tax as well for you, Dr. Zeus, and this is the other reason selling this sooner rather than later. Because your income is quite large, your capital gains tax, while you've got it as an investment property, you're only getting a 2.3% return. It's the same as what you get with the money sitting in the bank.
I thought that because it was a house that we had lived in, there was no capital gains tax on that.
That is correct. Excuse me, Hello, Therese speaking. Good, thank you. Okay, I certainly shall. Thanks, Rob. Thank you. Bye.
So capital gains tax. I thought because it was our home to live in, there wouldn't be any.
Yes, a lot of people do think that, but no, that is not correct. While it is your home and you're living in it as your principal residence, so your home at the moment with 1.3 million is capital gains tax exempt. But as soon as you move out and convert it into an investment property, it actually then attracts capital gains tax. It triggers the capital gains tax.
Is it from the time that we moved out, or is it from the time that we purchased?
It's from the time that you moved out. So what we need to do you know, Dr. Zeus, if you actually received a valuation, if your accountant did a valuation at the time you converted it to an investment property?
No, I don't remember.
Okay, so we're going to have to go to your accountant and talk to your accountant about that and have a valuation done now. He probably did do one without you even knowing, but we'll double check that. So it's from the time you started renting it out to the time that you sell it now. And so because your income's quite large, that will go on top of your income, and you'll have to pay tax at 45 cents on the dollar for 50% of that capital gain. So how it works out is, if your capital gain is, say, 100,000, then we take 50% of that, and so then that would leave you with $50,000. That would go onto your taxable income, which means in effect you'd be paying 45 cents on the dollar on $50,000. So before the capital value of the property appreciates too much more, then it is a benefit for you to sell it quicker, get the money into your super, and then there's no tax. If you were to retire at 60, it's tax free. Whereas at the moment, while you're actually have the property there, if you take that into retirement, then you still have to pay tax on your earnings from that. Okay. Whereas tax-free in super.
So, Therese, we've been going for 25 minutes, and I probably need to wrap up our meeting very soon.
Yes, definitely.
Is there a way that we could fast-track what you've got there?
Absolutely. I definitely will, Dr. Zeus. So we're going to invest the remaining money into Mrs. Zeus's name, because she is in a lower tax bracket. And then for the next couple of years, of course, the same thing. We'll just put your concessional contribution. At year 5, though, we're going to take that money out of that investment property and put an extra 300,000, because then we've rolled out to that extra 3 years, and we can put another 300,000. So at that point in time, Dr. Zeus, I'll just come down here and I'll show you Dr. Zeus and Mrs. Zeus. So at that point in time, that will give you, sorry, it was up, and now I'll show you what your return will be if you did have to actually leave the retirement a little bit earlier. So if we look at this, so I've mapped you out from where you are at the moment, and then I'm taking you through. So there's 417,108, the shares. So I've mapped everything out into your super balance and putting that extra money into super and selling the investment property. So it would mean that at 60, you would actually have jointly 2.418 million in your super balance, which would give you an income of 120,000, almost 121,000. So it's more than you're requiring. Now, the other thing you were concerned about is if you had to retire a little bit early, what would it look like if you did? So following this strategy, if you had to retire at, say, 57, Dr. Zeus, you would still have enough money. You'd have 111,000 to actually live on, which would mean that it would cover your expenses, including, but not everything with regards to this, but Mrs. Zeus would still have to work until the children are a little bit older, or until you're
I think we can end up being flexible with the amount. I mean, it's the requirement in the future is conceptual. The reality can be different. So
that's right.
We can make other adjustments to accommodate.
Well, the good part about it is if you actually went to 65, so if the illness didn't take hold and you went to 65, then you would actually have 2.7 million in super, and you'd have a totally tax-free income of 138,000 a year.
Well, let's hope I can probably stretch to 65, because that sounds very attractive.
And that's only by investing the money and putting the minimum into super after you sold that investment property. So I think it shows that selling that investment property, putting the money into a vehicle that actually gives you capital and income appreciation will actually give you a better return in the long run than holding that super, than holding the money sitting in the investment property, with the added problems that will actually, just things like repairs to the property and things like that. It will continue, whereas this will be appreciating for you, and it is more liquid for you if you do have to finish work early.
Well, that was that question that I asked earlier about liquidity.
Absolutely.
I suppose if there's any big shocks to the economy and all that sort of stuff, and the value of properties Well, values of properties can go down.
They can go down,
and they
absolutely.
can be difficult to sell when you really need to sell them. I remember some friends of mine during the GFC had a lot of difficulty trying to sell properties quickly.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I suppose, with the unknowns that I have, as far as health goes, it's better to have something where I can access smaller sums quickly.
Absolutely.
Tactical response things.
And as we're building your super balance, when you do sell the property, that's when I was talking to you last time, if you remember, about putting some of your money into capital protection.
Okay. All right. Well, can we wrap this up, Therese?
We most certainly can. So what I'll do is I will then, shall we make a meeting time for, say, in the next week, Dr. Zeus?
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll finalise the strategy, and then we'll go through the paperwork and actually go through the product disclosure statements and things like that.
I think you've shown an understanding of where we're at. You've got some interesting ideas there on how to protect our family and make sure that we can respond to any issues that come along. So that there's less stress in trying to move properties, etc. So look, let's get together again, and if you can present some paperwork on everything that you've got here, I think we're right to proceed.
Lovely, lovely. Well, I'll get my receptionist to ring your receptionist to make a time with you, Dr. Seuss, and Mrs. Seuss. I imagine that we'll be flexible with your children's times and things like that for schooling, and just like we have today. So. Okay. Is that suitable for you both?
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seuss and Mrs. Seuss.
Thanks, Therese.
Thank you.